This is the newest conversation piece for your home, the Dakboard Smart Display, combining information from apps you're already using every day with a display designed to bring the information you need to navigate your day to one convenient spot. Utilizing a DIY or an off-the-shelf controller, you can turn any display in your house into a smart data asset like this. I'm TurboDad, and let's build something cool. Welcome to the first video on the TurboDad Restorations channel. This is my first long-form video on the channel, and it's really because I prefer the reel format. So you won't see a lot of long-form videos because of my preference for reels and shorts, just because it fits my lifestyle a lot better. But I'm thinking I'll probably stop to make a more in-depth video like this one, probably once every month or so. It takes a lot of setup. I have to do, different camera angles and set up audio and really plan out a storyboard for how the video is going to flow so that it's efficient for everyone to learn and I'm not wasting anyone's time with unnecessary information. So please, in the comments, let me know what you might have me do differently. If there's anything you want to see that I didn't cover, feel free to let me know at the end of the video. Leave a comment about that. What has happened is the Dakboard family calendar has completely blown up on my Instagram. I think right now I'm at like 425,000 views or something like that. And really in a matter of days, my Instagram account has really blown up. And so in that comment section on Instagram, I saw a lot of people looking for a more in-depth video on how to make this Dakboard. Because on a reel, it's a 60-second video. It's very hard to get a feel for what that looks like. So in today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the setup for the Dakboard. So we're just going to take a monitor. We're going to set up the Raspberry Pi. We're going to set up the outputs to the monitor, and we're going to get the Dakboard running all on a bench, just so you can see tip to tail what that process looks like to just get the display up and running. So that way, if that's the only part you want help with, we get that out of the way. After that, I'm going to run through how you might want to do a little bit of carpentry, some simple carpentry to build a shroud of some kind for your Dakboard to make it really pop on the wall and kind of blend in like any other part of your home decor. And at the end, I'm also just going to run through how to wire it up, how to get the wires hidden really well. And I'm going to go through two different options for hiding your wires. One that's a little bit more in depth and a little bit more skill required if you have the skill. And then one that really anyone can do with some off-the-shelf parts to hide those wires even though they will still be there. So without further ado, let's jump right in. One question I get a lot is, why is the Dakboard a useful item? Why do I need this family calendar? How does it help me? Well, first off, I don't know how everyone else's families work, but very often I forget things that my wife tells me that we're going to be doing. So she might say, hey, we have to go to my parents' house for X event at this time, and I'll be honest, I will completely forget about it, even if she tells me multiple times. What's beautiful about this calendar is I can just look at the calendar every day and refresh my memory on what we have going on that day or in the next few days. So it saves me a lot of apologies forgetting things that I have been told many times. It keeps me lined up with what my kids have going on. So I am the primary caretaker for two amazing kids that I love dearly. And this calendar really helps me to easily stay on top of all the things I have on their schedule. And also, who's taking care of them if it's not me? So their grandparents are linked into our calendar. My wife's business outlook is linked into this calendar. It brings in 3 different calendars into one place. So I know who's doing what, where people need to be, all of that at all times. So it's super useful, highly suggested. And then, little perks, the weather. Being able to see what the weather's going to be like for the week is nice. And then also having just our family photos linked to this screen and constantly rotating is just a fun thing that brings a smile to the face every once in a while. And I really like that feature. So let's dive in and get started on this project. So the first thing we're going to do is go to raspberrypi.com, and we're going to go ahead and hit buy now on the raspberrypi.com website. From there, you can see all of their retailers. I prefer pishop.us. That's where I got everything for this project. And then you're going to go to the Pi 4B 2 gigabyte, and you're going to select the enclosure, the HDMI cable, the power supply, and the heat sinks. It's going to come out to just under $75, all said and done. And this is, again, just everything you need to match my build. You can certainly do a different build than this, but this is the one that I'm using today. So if you add that to your cart and then go ahead and get that on its way to you, that is the heart of the project that we're doing today. So this is the computer that we just purchased from those instructions, from that website. Hey, Jinx. This is a Raspberry Pi 4B, and this is the heart of our Dakboard. To go with that, if you want it to be clean and easy to stick to the back of your Dakboard, you can get a enclosure, as we did in that kit. You have an SD card, which we're about to get to shortly, a power supply, and a mini HDMI to regular HDMI cable. These are all of the important components you need just to get this device running with any basic monitor. So now that we have all of our Raspberry Pi parts here ready to go, now we're going to push them to the side and we're going to go ahead and do the technical part of this process with the Raspberry Pi, and that's just loading the Dakboard OS onto our itty bitty mini SD card. So push all this to the side, get out our computer. In my case, my computer only reads regular size SD cards, so I have to put my micro SD card into an adapter, put that into my computer, and then we can go ahead and get started with the Dakboard OS installation, which is only a couple steps, so it won't take long at all. So we're going to go ahead and go to raspberrypi.com, and we're going to go to the software section of their website. We're going to scroll down, and we're going to download the Raspberry Pi Imager for Windows, if that's the kind of computer you have. You can also do it for Mac OS or Linux if that's what you need. This is going to download, and once it's finished downloading, we're going to go ahead and run the file that we download. That's going to bring up the installer. We're going to click install. The installer is going to run, and then we're going to click finish with run Raspberry Pi Imager checked. Select the Raspberry Pi that you have. In our case, we bought the Raspberry Pi 4, and then choose your OS. When you click choose your OS, you're going to go down to other specific purpose OS, and then you're going to click on Dakboard and select the latest version of Dakboard OS. Then you're going to go to your storage option and you're going to select the SD card that you want to install to. This will wipe all of the data if you hit yes on your SD card, so make sure there's nothing important on your SD card. Now, go grab a coffee, play with your kids, do whatever it is that you want to do, because this is going to take several minutes to write and then verify the data on the SD card automatically. This is sped up 500 times, so this is going to take a minute or two. Once it is done, you're going to go ahead and get this message and click continue, and then you can pull out the SD card from your computer because this section of the process is done. Okay, now that our software is on our SD card, we can go ahead and pull our SD card out of our computer, move our computer off to the side, and then get started with putting this together, which is just a couple of small steps. So, editor's note. I realized this after I was done filming, but being that this is geared towards people who have really maybe never done this kind of thing before, it's important to note. When I'm assembling my Raspberry Pi on this video, I'm doing it on a static-free mat, which means if I'm touching the Raspberry Pi, I'm not going to be at risk of static discharge. Now, static discharge, for those of you who aren't aware, is not a danger to you, it's a danger to the sensitive electronics. So the Raspberry Pi, when you're handling just the board, will be damaged by static discharge. So you want to make sure that you're discharged before you touch the board. Now, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can do it with a static mat, like I have, and you can do it with a static wristband, and I'll show you what those look like. Here you can see my static mat, which is this white mat, and then you can also see right there a static wristband. Now, another option is to touch something metal to discharge your static if you don't want to get either one of these things. Just making sure that you discharge yourself by touching something metal is the absolute minimum you need to do. Now, that is an important step because while I don't commonly see Pis damaged by static, it's a shame to ruin $75 worth of equipment just because we aren't taking proper precautions. So I will link a static discharge bracelet in the description, and it's a really good idea just to make sure that you discharge one of those methods that I mentioned while working on this. Once it's in its case, you don't have to worry about it because once it's in its case, you're touching the case, not the board itself. So just go ahead and make sure that you discharge your static before starting this next step. So the first thing we have to do is put the Raspberry Pi into our enclosure. So go ahead and set it in there gently. This is a pretty hardy piece of hardware, so you don't have to be too worried about hurting anything. Just don't put a bunch of pressure on these bare pins here. And just if it's like silver, like these heat sinks or these silver parts, those you can put a little bit of pressure on. Just try not to put any pressure on these pins. And then go ahead and press it down until this little clip at the top here clicks into place. And then you should see that you've got your board from your Raspberry Pi seated nicely into your enclosure. After that, you can... All right, this is TurboDad dropping in again with another editor's note here. You will note 3 small heat sinks highlighted here that are on this Raspberry Pi board. These are just small adhesive heat sinks that were part of the order we placed for this Pi board on Pi Shop. You just need to go ahead and stick these on as pictured here before you move forward. I had already assembled this Pi a while ago and I had forgotten this step while filming, so my apologies there. Just go ahead and clip your cover on, like so. And if you ever want to take your cover back off again, you simply press in on this button. It will release the clips inside. You can remove the cover. But honestly, once it's in there, you really won't have to be messing with it much at all. It's just a beauty cover. So then we take our micro SD card that we've been working with for a minute with our Dakboard OS on it, and we insert it into the SD card slot on the Raspberry Pi. And that is all the programming that we need to do for this project. Okay, now your Raspberry Pi is ready to go into use. At this point in the video, we've just finished the assembly and setup of the Dakboard DIY CPU with the Raspberry Pi. Now, if you're a DIY person like I am, this is probably one of your favorite options. It's the least expensive option for the amount of features that you get, and it's fairly easy to assemble, as you've just seen. Now, if you prefer saving time over saving money, and you really just want something ready out of the box, you can continue with this DIY path for the rest of the process, like using a different screen, setting up your own shadow box, that sort of thing. You can still do that DIY stuff and buy a computer, a Dakboard controller, what they call a CPU, ready right off the shelf. So if you go to Dakboard's website, you can get what they call their mini CPU, which is a small, very low, small form factor CPU that will run basic Dakboard functions. It can't do video and that sort of thing, but it can do all the calendar stuff that you would normally want to do, but it cannot do touch. You can get that CPU for a very reasonable price, very similar to what you pay for all the Raspberry Pi parts. If you want touch and you want to be able to run animations and things like that on your screen, then you really want what they call their CPU, like their V4 or their V5 CPU, which is about double the price of the DIY Raspberry Pi. But again, it's ready out of the box. You just plug it in and continue with the steps from here. So if all the steps up till now seem like something that you're excited to do, great. Buy the Raspberry Pi as I've instructed and build it yourself. If you'd like to just have it a little bit easier and not go through those steps, check out the CPUs that Dakboard has for sale at their website, like the Mini or the V4. They may be a really good option for you, and you can still use your own screen of your choice if you'd like. Okay, so once we have our Raspberry Pi with the Dakboard OS all ready to go, set that aside for a minute. Now we need something to display the output from that new Dakboard OS. My monitor of choice, because I have way too many of these lying around, is a standard HD 27-inch monitor. This is a great size to have really good visibility from midway across a room. It has really good space for a large calendar, a large photo frame, and good visibility of the weather and that sort of thing. So I think a 27-inch is really a great option. And you'll notice some of the off-the-shelf options, like the Skylight, offer a 27-inch, and I think that is because it's a really great size. In terms of touchscreen versus not touchscreen, the Dakboard and the Raspberry Pi can run a USB output from a touchscreen. So if you have a 27-inch monitor with USB output for touch, you can use that. If you have a monitor overlay for touch that goes out to USB, you can use that. Touch is really a secondary option for the Dakboard because the Dakboard is first and foremost a smart display for all the apps you're already using, like Google Calendar, Cozy, that sort of thing. For most people, editing everything that's on this screen will be done on their phone in the apps they already use every day. So that's the monitor. So really, all that's left is to hook it up. So let's go through that. Okay, so now we have the back of our Raspberry Pi computer and the back of our monitor. We have the power input, our two HDMI outputs, and those are the three that we care about. This is obviously a headphone jack. We also have USB if you're going to use a touchscreen, and Ethernet if you're going to use wired internet. So what we do is we go ahead and take our mini HDMI cable, plug it in to one of the mini HDMI ports on the Raspberry Pi, and then we take our HDMI cable, plug it into the HDMI port on the back of our monitor, take our power supply, which is USB-C from our Raspberry Pi kit, plug that into the Pi, and then last but not least, we plug in the power cord for our monitor over here, and that will plug into the wall. So regardless of whether you used a Raspberry Pi CPU or a off-the-shelf Dakboard mini CPU or a off-the-shelf Dakboard V4 or V5 CPU, we need to start by creating an account and a screen to link that to. So you're going to go down to create an account, create a username for your Dakboard account, link that account to an email address, and then also create a password for the account. If you'd like, you can link your Dakboard account to Google, but it will require you to create an account for Dakboard to link it to. Once you've created that account, it's going to walk you through a couple of setup steps. So first of all, you're going to put in your location, where you're located for the weather alerts, traffic, etc. Put in your time zone and your preferred language and time format. Then it's going to tell you about the different types of screen you can use, custom or predefined. We're going to be using predefined in this layout today. And then it's going to talk to you about the different types of devices you can use. Obviously, we've discussed the Dakboard products as well as the Raspberry Pi today, but there's also options just to type in the Dakboard website onto any computer you're using and display it on, say, a second monitor, things like that. It's going to tell you some different ways you can get linked in with the community, but we can go ahead and click Finish. Okay, now that we have our account created, we need to work with our predefined screen creation. You can make a custom screen if you go into the subscription options, but if you want to use the free option, you need to use one of the predefined screens. So we're going to start there. There are 5 different layouts. We are going to use the big calendar layout because it is the most popular and it is the one that highlights the calendar the most, which is really most people's favorite feature. So there are a couple different options that you can feel free to experiment with. They might be better for you in different situations, but big calendar is the one that gained traction, so that's the one we are going to look at. Background is the photos that are set up in the background of your layout. So in this big calendar layout, it's actually the photo album that is used to populate the left side of the screen. So there is a natural landscape stock photo option that Dakboard gives you that you can use if you prefer, but you can also link your own personal files. So for my family, for example, we have our family photos in a Google Photos account. So we would link our Google Photos by authorizing our Google Photos account down here. You just log into your Google account, give it access, and then you can move on. Same process for Flickr, Apple Photos, OneDrive, any other options you might want to use. You can change the brightness. You have some options on cropping, fading, that sort of thing, and that will do your photo album. Under calendars, you enable the calendar, and then you can choose a type, agenda or monthly. Monthly is going to be a more regular, like a more traditional layout of a calendar with the different days. Agenda is more of an Outlook layout where it shows you the next things coming up in your days. We prefer agenda because we have some days that are very busy. It doesn't fit very well in a monthly format always. So we have it set to agenda. And you can show a maximum number of days. So days with no events won't be shown. And if you have a day with like 30 events, like sometimes we do, that day will take up so much of the screen that it may not show 5 days. If you have days that have a lot of events, it may only show 2 or 3 at a time. And if you have days with very few events, it will show 5 days. So really there's nothing wrong with giving it the maximum number of days, because even if you put in 10 days, for example, it's only going to show 10 days if it can fit all the events for the next 10 days on the screen at once. And this is one of those situations where the touchscreen may come in handy. If you'd like to be able to see more events, if you have very busy days, with a touchscreen you have the option to kind of click and drag on the screen to show a scroll effect on the calendar. So that's one reason why a touchscreen may come in handy for you. There's some additional options for how you can view the calendar here under additional view options. Those are helpful, they're nice, depends on what your personal preferences are. And then if you go scroll down, that's where you link in the calendars that you're going to use. You can use Google Calendar or Microsoft Calendar with a linked account, or you can add any other style of calendar by adding a calendar URL. Cozy, for example, a very popular family calendar. If you go to your Cozy account and copy your sharing link, you would just copy your Cozy link in here, and then it will allow you to view your Cozy calendar right on this Dakboard display. So to link a Google Calendar, I'll just show you what it looks like. I'll have to blur this out so you can't see all my different information. But if we go to sign in, you'll sign in and then give Dakboard access, and then you'll just simply close the tab. Then you can refresh the page and you will see all of your Google Calendar options for all the different calendars you have in your Google Calendar account will show up here. So I will grab my TurboDad sample calendar and I will save those changes. Then you have some options around date and time, if you want it to show or not, if you want it to be digital or analog, 12-hour or 24-hour, if you want to show seconds, if you want to have an AM, PM indicator, and what your date format is. You can set your weather preferences in terms of where you get your weather from one of these 3 apps, and you set your location, your units, and what you want that forecast to look like. After that, you can choose to add RSS feeds to show news on your screen if you like. We do not do that, but you can. And then you can also add to-do lists from Google Tasks, Todoist, or Microsoft To Do that will show up on this screen. You can put a custom message up like TurboDad Weekly anywhere on the screen. You kind of have to choose your spot based on how your layout is for where your clock is positioned and things like that. And then once you have this all set up, you can save your changes and sample view the screen by clicking View Screen in the top right. So here is a sample of what our Dakboard will look like once we get it set up. If this looks right to you and you're happy with it, you can just go click Options in the top right, and it will take you back to your Dakboard homepage. Now we're ready to set up our Dakboard. So let's go take a look at that. So now that we have the Dakboard account created, we can go ahead and boot up our Dakboard for the first time and get our Dakboard account linked to our Dakboard. So we have our HDMI cable plugged in to our Raspberry Pi. We have our Raspberry Pi power supply ready to plug in, and we have our monitor power supply ready to plug in. So there are 3 cables, 2 of them plug into the wall, and 1 of them plugs into your monitor. So we'll go ahead and plug in the monitor first, and then we'll plug in the power for the Raspberry Pi, and let's see what this looks like booting up for the first time. Gives you a little rainbow flash of color there. Gives you a loading screen, and this loading screen will sit there for 15 to 30 seconds, depending on which Raspberry Pi you have. The faster Raspberry Pi you've purchased, the quicker this will go. Jinx is unamused. Right, Jinx? Psst, psst. Meow. Yeah, who cares ever. Okay, so this is the screen that will pop up once it boots. And now we can walk you through the very easy process of linking your Dakboard to your Dakboard account. Okay, so with your phone camera, you're going to go ahead and highlight the QR code for the Wi-Fi network and tap Join Dakboard Network and agree to join. Now your phone is connected to the Wi-Fi being output by your Dakboard device. Then you're going to close up the settings button and you're going to tap the 10.0.0.5 link that comes up at the bottom of your camera and follow that QR code. That's going to bring up this Dakboard settings screen. So then you're going to go ahead and select a Wi-Fi network. You're going to put in your Wi-Fi password. You're going to select your time zone. You're going to select if you have speakers on your unit, whether or not you want it to play audio. Mine is always at 0. You're going to pick your orientation, how you want it to be laid out, vertically, horizontally, flipped, etc. I am doing landscape. And then you're going to pick the resolution of your monitor. Mine is a HD 1080p monitor. You can set an on-off schedule by day, by weekdays, by weekends, etc., or completely custom, where you can change when the display is on. So this means that at 12 a.m. it will shut off, and every day at 6 a.m. it will turn back on. And you can add as many schedules for as many days as you like. You can also add password protect settings and things like that, but I don't mess with any of that because I'm running on a very secure internal network. And I will add my password myself off screen. And then you go ahead and hit Save Changes, and your device will now display on your Dakboard. So once you have your Dakboard linked to Wi-Fi through the process we just completed on our phone, you can also use your phone or computer now to use the link code to add your device to your Dakboard account that we created. So if you go to your Dakboard account and you go to Displays and Devices and click Add a Display. You can give it a name. I will call mine Kitchen. And then you add the link code, which in our case here is JD4JT4. And we're going to assign it to the predefined screen that we created. And then we're going to hit Save. And it will tell us that, hey, display and device, name Kitchen, assigned predefined screen with a serial number. It's all good. And lo and behold, there is our Dakboard working wirelessly with the account we just set up. And that's it. Now, if I were to go add a calendar event on my Google Calendar, it would automatically show back up on this calendar. If I added new files to my shared photo list that I was using here, those photos would show up in rotation automatically. I never have to touch this screen if I don't want to. Now, many do like the touchscreen options. So once you have this set up, if you use a touchscreen monitor, you can scroll up and down. If your to-do list is set up on here, you can check off to-do list items. And there's a few other things you can do, like clicking on the calendar items to show more details and that sort of thing. But the idea that you're going to use this to create new calendar events and things like that just isn't as efficient as typing that all in on your phone with the apps you're already using. So there you go. It's up, it's working, and we're all done with the display setup side of this project. So now that we have the display up and running and ready to go, we're talking about making it look a little bit prettier. So I did a shadow box on my wall-mounted display, and I used 1x4 premium pine to make mine. I did a 1x4 by 10 foot just to make sure I had enough. And then I measured the monitor and added a 1/16 of an inch to what I measured to get my inside dimensions so that it fits nice and tight, but not interference fit, so that it slides on pretty easily. And then I made this box, this shadow box. Now you'll notice my joints are flat, straight joints. They're not nice miter joints. If I was making this for someone else, I would have used miter joints, but I have 2 young boys. They like to break lots of things, so I didn't have a lot of faith this was going to last very long. So flat joints with the inside dimensions as measured plus a 1/16, which means that the outer boards have to be that dimension plus a 1/16 plus the thickness of 2 of these boards. So these boards are 3/4 inch each, so that's 1.5 inches of extra length on the outer boards plus a 1/16, just a hair. And then the bottom boards are the exact length of the monitor plus a 1/16. Once I have them cut out to the right length, which you can do with a cheap miter box and saw, which you can get for I think $15, I'll link it in the description, and a couple of corner clamps to hold and glue the corners, which I will also link in the description. You would want at least one, I would say, for each corner. Really, if you want to do it quickly, you probably want 2 for each corner, so that's 8 clamps. Glue them, and then I brad nailed the ends with a brad nailer. And I didn't even take the time to cover these with wax. Again, if I was doing this job for someone else, I would have covered those with wax to make them nice and clean. But I, again, didn't expect this to survive very long, being that my boys are crazy. So that shadow box slides over the display once you get it on the wall. And then in my case, I am wall mounting this. So my monitor has 2 wall mounts ready to go on the back. That's I think a $10 wall mount. I can link that in the description as well. You can use any wall mount that meets your needs. If you want to just use the monitor stand that came with your monitor, if you have tabletop space, if you have countertop space, you could just find a place to lean this or put it on its original monitor stand. That's a viable option as well. I wanted to wall mount mine, so I used a wall mount. But that's the shadow box portion. What we do need to do before we mount on our wall is do a little bit of quick math. So what we need to measure is we need to measure where the bracket mounts on our monitor are compared to the top of the monitor. That will give us this measurement. Then we need to measure the total height, which we already have from making our shadow box, of the monitor. So we can understand where our monitor is going to be on the wall in terms of height based on where we mount our bracket, measuring up from there, and then measuring down from the top of the monitor, so we know exactly where it's going to line up on the wall. So on my monitor, let's say it's 6 inches and 16 inches. So we're going to go over to the wall and we're going to set up for our mount as if these are the measurements. Okay, so we're just going to use this nice blank piece of wall as our example. So, given the measurements that we took, we have a 16-inch total height of the monitor, and the mount is going to be 6 inches down from the top. So what you're going to do, whoever makes the decisions in the house about where this is going to go, they're going to mark the center of where they want the monitor. All right, so let's say they want it right here. They tell you that star, that point on the wall, that is where they want the center of the monitor. So we know it's 16 inches tall. So we take a measurement with 8 at the center, which is halfway. We make a mark for the top. We make a mark for the bottom. So we go back to our decision maker, whoever that is, and we say, here's the top, here's the bottom. Does that match your expectations? And then you can also measure your width from there. I believe ours is about 24 inches. So you can say, in addition to the top and the bottom, it's going to be 12 inches each side from there. So you can measure 12 inches to each side from there. And that gives you the bounds of the box that you're going to be putting on the wall. And if that's where you want it, then you move on. You say, okay, we know that the mounting point is 6 inches below the top. So then you measure 6 inches below the top. All right. Now the key is hoping that your studs line up at least somewhere in this box with 2 studs. So we're hoping that somewhere in this line, somewhere in there, we've got 2 studs to bolt our mount to. So you're going to grab a stud finder, you're going to scan this wall, and you're going to mark your studs wherever they are, and then you're going to mount your mount at this identified level, because you know that's how much further down from the top of the monitor you need to be for the mount that you have. Now your mount may have slightly different directions, but I found this method works pretty good for almost every mount of these smaller size screens. So, especially the rail mounts, like what I have. So once you have your mount installed at this level, then what you're going to do is you're going to take a template of the media box that you have, if you're using a media box. If you're just going to mount it on the wall and use conduit to get your wires up here, you just mount your screen, put everything inside the shadow box, put the shadow box on, and then plug in your extension cord to run your electrics. So working with electricity is dangerous. No two ways about it. If you're going to do this part of the project, you need to do it with your own expertise, with a clear understanding and honesty with yourself about what your capabilities are. And really, if you've never done electrical work before, I would not suggest starting now. If you have a friend or a professional that you can call to do this part for you, if you want it to look nice and neat like this, please, that is a great option to do. This is just a documentation of what I did for entertainment purposes. You should not try it yourself. It is not something that is safe to do unless you are experienced with this type of work. So to do a clean in-wall installation like this does require electrical knowledge. You have to be comfortable working with 120 volt electricity. And so I'm going to be pretty simple in the way I describe this, simply because I don't want you thinking you can do it simply because I told you how to do it. So if you are familiar at all with 120 volt, this will be very obvious to you and it will make a lot of sense. If you aren't familiar with working with 120 volt, please hire someone who is familiar to do this, or go with the simpler route. So we have a 120 volt outlet down here. We cut off power to that outlet, make sure it's dead with something like a 120 volt tester pen. And we use a hanger, a wire snake, a piece of rope, whatever we can, to pull a new piece of copper wire from the outlet to the hole in the drywall. What's really important to note is this only works in a position where both the outlet and your media box are on the inside of the stud that you want to be working with. There's a stud right here. The outlet is on the inside of the stud. The media box is on the inside of that stud. If this outlet was on the outside of this stud instead of the inside like it is, it would be much more difficult to run the wire up to this box. You'd have to get a little bit more creative. So you wire that outlet to the outlet in this box. The media console I will link in the description. It works very well behind a 27-inch, but it is very tight to get it to hide completely behind a 27-inch monitor. I actually had to trim a little bit off the top because I had a little bit of the frame sticking out. This is an old construction box. So what that means is you cut a hole for the box out of your drywall. And there are 4 screws that have tabs on them that clamp the box to the drywall. Once the box is clamped to the drywall, you add the outer frame of the box to make it look nice and pretty. If you buy this box, it comes with detailed instructions on how to install it. I would suggest that you follow the instructions for that box instead of me just repeating them. Once the box is in place, you can decide how you want to mount your screen. My mount is actually attached to the studs here and here that are in the wall. So that's what I would suggest doing, is attaching your mount over your media box to the studs on each side of your media box. And that is how, in general, you would do the electrical installation for an in-wall. Again, I'm being a little bit vague because I don't want to give anyone who isn't capable of this the confidence to try it. It should not be attempted unless you are familiar with home wiring. As a homeowner, you are, in many states, legally allowed to do electrical work in your own home. If you are going to have someone else do electrical work in your home, many states require that you are licensed to do work in other people's homes. So just be aware of that. Now, if the in-wall installation like this is too much for you to handle, and you don't want to pay someone else to do this type of installation for you, because certainly this could cost $200 to $500 to have someone else do for you, depending on the contractor you use, you can do a conduit installation. So let me go grab some conduit and show you what that looks like. So this is a piece of wire conduit. It is a small channel that allows you to place wires inside of it to keep them from looking unruly and to make them look less out of place on the wall. The front side can be painted any color you want. This piece of conduit that I'm using as an example is actually painted with some textured stone paint because I was using it next to a fireplace previously. And the back side has adhesive on it. So for this situation, if you didn't have my coat rack here, what you would do is you'd have your Dakboard mount on the wall, take your conduit, put it behind your monitor, running down to your outlet. And then what you can do is you can cut your conduit to the desired length, paint it the color of your choice, preferably probably the same color as your wall, if you still have some paint left from when your walls were painted. And then you can run the wires through this conduit and plug your power supplies into this outlet. And so you will have two plugs coming out here and plugging into an outlet at the bottom, but the wire run from your monitor down to the outlets will be much cleaner than just bare wires. And if you did have coat hooks, for example, on this wall, when you hang your coats here, all of a sudden that's going to become much more hidden and it's going to look much less obvious. So that is the second option, and that does not require this outlet box. And if you're wondering where the Raspberry Pi goes in this sort of situation, you can just take some double-sided tape and double-sided tape the Raspberry Pi enclosure to the back of your monitor. And that's how you would do it if you didn't want to do any 120 volt wiring. So, we're on the home stretch here. We have our Raspberry Pi all ready to go. It has Dakboard OS on it. It is linked to our Wi-Fi. And it is also linked to our Dakboard account that we recently created. So that's all ready to go. The only thing that remains is installing it based on which option we selected. So you can do a surface tabletop mount if you would like, using a monitor stand and double-sided tape to hold your Raspberry Pi to the back of your monitor of choice. And then you can just tie your cables up out of the way behind the monitor and plug it into the wall behind the monitor, and it should look pretty neat if you have the table space or the flat surface space for that option. Maybe on a buffet, on an entryway, that sort of thing wouldn't look too out of place. For the wall mount options, we had the easier option if you were uncomfortable with electrical work, and that was using a conduit to go from where our monitor mount is to our outlet at the bottom. In that situation, you would also want to use some double-sided tape to stick your Raspberry Pi behind your monitor and tie up your wires behind your monitor as well. A little bit of more work to get it organized and looking nice, but very possible depending on what you're working with. Or third option, you have what I did, which is the in-wall mount that you can either install yourself if you're savvy or have a professional do for you. Now, The in-wall mount makes for the easiest organization of wires because all we have to do is plug in our wires and just shove them in there because they are out of the way and they will never be seen again. So we will go ahead and do that. Plug in our wires and prepare for the monitor to go on. All right, and then we'll grab our monitor and hook it into our monitor mount, monitor wall mount of choice. Now be careful. Well, we need to put on our wires first, I suppose. Plug our wires in as we did before. And then hook it into the monitor mount. Now be careful with this part. If you don't hook your monitor mount in correctly, you could end up in a situation where your monitor falls off the wall. And don't ask me how I know that. I was very lucky when I hooked this up the first time that even though I had not positively engaged the monitor mount, I had a pile of backpacks left out here that it fell onto, and so it did survive. That was a scary moment. But once you have it up on your monitor mount, it should go ahead and start up. And then grab our shadow box, place our shadow box over top of our screen. Now mine fits very tightly, so it takes me a second to get it up there. But there you go. Shadow box, wall mount, nice and clean. Again, and there it is. The final product of the Dakboard digital smart display. Obviously ours is set up like a family calendar, which is probably the most popular use for the Dakboard that I'm aware of. And really the bulk of the work is in the setup of the display itself. Certainly you can go as far as you want in terms of making a bigger project for yourself in the way that you display it. That is up to you. If you liked this content, please feel free to let me know. Give me a like. If you have any questions about what we did or want some clarification about some of the steps, please let me know. Be happy to answer any comments that come in. It's been a long time, probably 10 years since I did long form video. So I appreciate your patience as I gain efficiency with the cameras and audio recorders that I'm using. I'm not used to them. It's taken me a bit to get back into the groove, and it's been a long day of recording because of that. So thank you so much for your time. I hope you found this helpful. Have a great day. Hi. I got you, big girl. Do you want to say hello to the people on the YouTubes? Do you want to say hello to the people on the YouTube? Say hello. Yeah. Good girl. Good girl. All right. I'm gonna start. Why don't you eat some food?